Welcome to this explainer on the Great American Rail Mystery. If you've ever traveled abroad, you've probably asked yourself a pretty simple question. Why does the United States, an absolute global superpower, completely lack a high-speed rail network? Well, today we are going to investigate exactly why that is. We're going to break down the timeline, follow the money, and specifically look at how heavily polarized politics and massive corporate lobbying are basically stifling high-speed transit in America. Okay, let's dive into this because there is a glaring, stark contrast between the American train experience and the international standard. On one hand, you have the everyday reality for many of us here in the US. Trains that are, let's be honest, often slow, kind of clumsy, and absolutely absurdly expensive. I mean, nobody really wants to just creep down the coastline in an Amtrak, right? You really can't blame people for avoiding it. But internationally, it's a completely different story. Bullet trains whiz along so fast and so smoothly that average folks actually prefer them over flying. Instead of a ridiculously long taxi ride to an airport just to deal with unbearable security lines, you just board a sleek bullet train right in the city center. For those mid-range distances, they are faster, cheaper, and vastly more comfortable. So what's the actual motive for wanting these trains in the first place? Well, it really comes down to incredible efficiency. Get this. The International Energy Agency reports that the rail sector carries 8% of the world's passengers, yet it only accounts for a tiny 2% of global transport energy demand. That is a massive return on investment. Bullet trains are dramatically more energy efficient than both planes and automobiles. Plus, 3/4 of all passenger rail activity happens on electric trains. That literally makes the rail industry the only widely electrified form of transportation we have today. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how it completely busts a very common myth. Lots of large companies will claim Americans just don't care about high-speed rail. They love to blame the lack of transit on our so-called automobile culture. But a 2015 study by the American Public Transportation Association completely shatters that idea. It turns out nearly 2/3 of surveyed Americans, that's 66%, would be totally happy to use bullet trains. And it gets better. When those same people actually learned about the specific cost and time-saving benefits, that slice of the pie grew even larger. And that demand, it is even stronger with younger generations. Look at this number, 71%. 71% of the 18 to 44 demographic, which is primarily millennials, explicitly stated they would like to ride bullet trains. What's more, we're not just talking about a fringe niche issue here. High-speed rail actually enjoys broad, bipartisan support all across the country. 3/4 of survey participants even supported making it easier for real estate developers to build amenities right near high-speed rail stations. The bottom line, average Americans on both sides of the aisle clearly want this technology. It's popular, it's proven, so why not? Seriously, we know the technology works flawlessly in other parts of the world, and we know the American public overwhelmingly wants it. So if the demand and the technological capability are both clearly right there, who or what is actively killing high-speed rail in the United States? Let's move to the timeline and see how this builds, because America has actually been trying to construct this network for a very long time. When Japan first introduced their famous bullet trains, the US tried to hop on board almost immediately. Back in 1965, President Lyndon B. Johnson signed the High-Speed Ground Transportation Act. Construction got underway, but it hit frequent mechanical problems, and by 1975, the funding was severely depleted. And we've seen these renewed efforts in the 21st century too, like massive federal grants being awarded, only to be pulled completely in 2019. It seems like every time we try, the projects meet a very similar, frustrating fate. Which brings us to our first major hurdle. Culprit number 1, the politics of delay. The biggest advantage the US has right now is that the technology already exists globally. We don't need to reinvent the wheel, or the train in this case. But our heavily polarized political climate makes securing massive cooperative federal investment incredibly difficult. Take the Acela Express on the East Coast, for example. Actually, speeding that line up to true high-speed standards would require billions in federal funding. And where does that funding go? It gets completely bogged down in partisan gridlock. As experts point out, the bottom line is we're really bad at just building things cheaply and quickly in the US in general. Nowhere is this more obvious than in California. Connecting the state's biggest cities sounded fantastic on paper, but in reality, the planning process was just overwhelmed by fierce political squabbles, heavily rushed construction plans, and some really bad financial decisions. Systemic political gridlock literally turns a proven, potentially game-changing technology into a massive bureaucratic mess. The battles over these giant infrastructure projects get incredibly messy at the ground level. For instance, in 2019, the Trump administration pulled $929 million in federal grants that were designated for California's high-speed rail. This happened following intense disputes over the project's pacing and scope. The objective takeaway from our sources here is absolutely crucial. None of these failures have anything to do with the actual technology of high-speed rail. Bullet trains are deeply, safely established globally. It is purely ground-level administrative mistakes, endless delays, and polarized politics that consistently derail these projects.
And that leads us to our second roadblock. Culprit number 2, corporate sabotage.
So beyond all that government gridlock, a massive contributor to the downfall of high-speed rail comes from gargantuan private industries that are actively lobbying against transit development. Take the Reason Foundation. They are a self-proclaimed libertarian think tank, and they regularly lead the charge in bashing efforts to build bullet trains. It's almost clockwork. Whenever a high-speed rail project starts to actually gain serious momentum in America, organizations exactly like this one become very vocal. They attack the viability of the transit networks and work hard to shape public opinion against them.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly what's going on behind the scenes. To understand why they are so invested in stopping trains, we simply have to follow the money. According to reports, funding for these attacks comes from massive heavy hitters. We're talking the Koch brothers, ExxonMobil, Chevron, Shell Oil, the American Petroleum Institute, and Delta Airlines. Now, you might be wondering, why would big oil and major airlines pour billions of dollars into lobbyists, paid politicians, and think tanks? Well, because if Americans finally get the chance to use cheap, fast bullet trains for mid-range travel, the major airlines and oil companies are the ones who suffer financially. It's really that simple. They are just protecting their highly lucrative monopolies from a superior competing technology.
Moving on to Section 3, pushing through the noise.
So, between heavily polarized politics and billion-dollar corporate lobbying, successfully implementing a true nationwide high-speed rail network across the entire United States, that's going to take decades of intense power struggles. But despite all those obstacles at the national level, localized efforts are pushing ahead anyway. Virgin Trains USA has been aggressively pushing to make a fully electric train from Las Vegas to Los Angeles operational. Down in Texas, there's a project connecting Houston to Dallas underway that could literally reach true Japanese bullet train speeds. And over in Florida, they're working on a line right now from Miami to Tampa. There is a real newfound fervor for these localized projects, partly because investing in electric bullet trains has been positioned by some lawmakers as a key element of the Green New Deal. Heck, even that infamous California train, despite all its daily struggles, still holds out hope that it might pull it all together someday. The technology is completely ready, it's globally proven, and Americans genuinely want it. But here is the ultimate question. Are we ready to overcome the polarized politics and heavy corporate lobbying? High-speed rail in the U.S. has languished on the back burner for decades now, held back by ground-level gridlock and fierce opposition from the oil and airline industries. But as these new regional projects fight through the noise, the future of American transit might just arrive one state at a time. Keep your eyes on these local lines, because how they battle through these political and corporate roadblocks will ultimately determine how we all travel in the decades to come. So what do you think? Will we ever see a nationwide bullet train?